Imagine waking up right now, but there's no roof over your head, no walls, no blanket. And the sky outside? Gray, heavy, dripping. It's been raining for 6 days straight, and it's not stopping anytime soon. No phone to check the weather, no umbrella, no raincoat, no dry socks, just you, soaked to the bone, standing in mud that used to be solid ground, wondering one simple question: where do I even go? Here's the thing. Most people picture cavemen sitting cozy in a cave, fire crackling, rain outside, everyone just waiting it out. Cute, peaceful, totally wrong. Because here's what nobody tells you. A week of nonstop rain 20,000 years ago wasn't a cozy inconvenience. It was one of the most dangerous situations a human being could face. And by the end of this, you'll understand why most modern humans, dropped into that situation with zero preparation, would not make it past day 3. Let's start with the obvious question. Why is rain even a problem? It's just water, right? You've probably stood in rain before and felt fine. But here's the twist. It was never really about the rain falling on your head. It was about what rain does to everything around you. Slowly, quietly, over days. Think about it like this. Your body is basically a tiny furnace that needs to stay at a very specific temperature. Drop that temperature by just a few degrees for long enough, and your body starts shutting down systems to protect your core. That's hypothermia. And you don't need snow for that. You don't even need cold weather. You just need wet skin, wind, and time. That's it. Rain is basically a slow, patient thief, stealing your body heat one drop at a time. Now, here's where it gets worse. Ancient humans didn't have waterproof jackets. They didn't have synthetic fabrics that wick water away. Their clothing, usually animal hide or woven plant fiber, soaked up water like a sponge. So the very thing meant to protect them became the thing working against them, holding cold water right against their skin for hours. Picture a stick figure wrapped in fur, walking through rain, and instead of the fur keeping them warm, it's dragging, dripping, doubling in weight. That's not protection anymore. That's a wet blanket you can't take off. But this wasn't even the biggest problem. The biggest problem was fire. Fire wasn't a luxury back then. It wasn't for ambiance. Fire was medicine, fire was safety, fire was the only thing standing between a human and a slow, cold death. Fire cooked food so it didn't poison you. Fire kept predators at a distance. Fire dried out soaked clothing and numb hands. Fire was basically the original life support system. Now imagine trying to start a fire using 2 sticks and some dry grass. In the pouring rain. Go on, imagine it. Everything you touch is damp. The wood you find is soaked through. Even the tiny twigs you'd use as kindling have absorbed moisture from the air. You could strike sparks for hours and get nothing but smoke and frustration. This is the exact moment where a modern person, no matter how strong or smart, starts to panic. Because without fire, you don't just lose warmth. You lose your only way to cook meat safely, which means the only food option left might be raw, which comes with its own brutal risks. And here's the part nobody talks about. It's not the storm itself that kills people, it's what happens after the storm. See, when rain falls for days, it doesn't just sit on the surface. It seeps into the ground, floods low areas, swells rivers, and turns solid earth into a trap. Streams that were ankle deep suddenly become chest deep, fast-moving hazards. Trails that led safely from camp to water source can literally disappear underwater. And mudslides on hillsides could bury entire shelters without warning. So now you're not just cold and hungry, you're potentially cut off from clean water, cut off from safe paths, and surrounded by ground that could shift under your feet at any moment. Try picturing this scene, a stick figure family standing at the edge of what used to be a walking path. Now, a rushing brown river staring at each other like, okay, now what? Now let's talk about food, because this is where things get really interesting. You might think, okay, no problem, I'll just eat some fruit or catch a fish or grab some nuts. Sounds simple, except rain messes with all of it. Heavy rain scares off animals who instinctively hide in shelters just like you'd want to. Fishing becomes nearly impossible in swollen, muddy rivers where visibility is zero and currents are dangerous. Foraging becomes a nightmare because rain hides tracks, washes away scent trails hunters relied on, and turns edible plants into slippery, hard-to-identify mush. So within just 2 or 3 days of nonstop rain, ancient humans could be facing an uncomfortable trifecta: no fire, no dry shelter, and shrinking food options. That's not an inconvenience. That's survival mode activated. So, how did they actually survive this? Turns out the answer isn't about being tough, it's about being smart and shockingly well prepared way before the rain even started. First, location. Ancient humans didn't build shelters just anywhere. They picked spots slightly elevated from surrounding land, so water would drain away instead of pooling inside their living space. They looked for natural overhangs, caves with slightly tilted openings, or dense tree canopies that acted like a first layer of roof, breaking the force of rain before it even reached the ground below. Second, and this one surprises people, fire management. Skilled groups didn't wait for rain to start before worrying about dry wood. They collected and stored dry kindling in advance, often keeping it inside caves, under rock ledges, or wrapped in bark and leaves specifically to protect it from moisture. Some groups even kept small embers smoldering continuously, transferring them carefully from one fire to the next because relighting fire from scratch was risky, and losing it completely could be catastrophic. Third, clothing and shelter design got smarter than you'd expect. Certain groups used tightly woven grass, bark layers, or animal fat rubbed into hides to create early primitive waterproofing. It wasn't perfect, but it slowed down how quickly clothing soaked through, buying precious hours of warmth. And here's a detail that blows people's minds. Some ancient communities built raised sleeping platforms inside their shelters, lifting themselves off the ground using branches or stone. Why? Because ground moisture during heavy rain could seep upward, chilling anyone sleeping directly on it, even under a dry roof. Basically, they invented an early version of "don't sleep on a cold, wet floor," thousands of years before mattresses existed. The real reason may surprise you, though. It wasn't individual toughness that got them through the week. It was teamwork. Groups would divide responsibilities almost instinctively. Some watched the fire constantly, feeding it small amounts of dry fuel to keep it alive without wasting resources. Others managed food, rationing what they had stored from before the rain started. And others focused purely on monitoring the environment, watching water levels rise, checking for unstable ground, staying alert to changes most of us would completely ignore today. This wasn't panic. This was quiet, practiced coordination, refined over generations of facing the exact same seasonal problem year after year. Now here's where things get even stranger. Some researchers believe extended rainy periods may have actually pushed early humans toward major innovations. Confined spaces, forced idle time, and the need for group problem solving created perfect conditions for tool improvement, storytelling, and social bonding. Basically, being trapped together during bad weather might have quietly shaped early human culture and cooperation. Let that sink in for a second. The thing that seems like pure hardship, a miserable week stuck inside a cave listening to endless rain, may have actually helped build the foundation of human social behavior. Boredom and shared struggle, pushing people to communicate, plan, and bond in ways sunny, easy days never demanded. So, what do modern people get wrong about all this? Most people assume ancient humans were constantly one storm away from death, fragile and helpless against nature. But that's not accurate. What made them vulnerable wasn't weakness. It was the absence of modern convenience, not the absence of intelligence or preparation. In reality, surviving a week of rain required forward planning, environmental awareness, resource management, and group cooperation that most modern humans never practice, simply because we've never needed to. You've probably never had to ask yourself, if it rains for a week straight starting tomorrow, do I have dry fuel stored? Do I know which paths flood first? Do I know how to keep food edible without refrigeration? That's not because you're less capable. It's because your ancestors solved this problem so thoroughly that you've literally never needed to think about it. Every dry raincoat, every roof that doesn't leak, every light switch you flip during a storm, that's the payoff of thousands of years of trial, error, and hard-earned lessons passed down. So here's the big lesson hiding inside all this. Survival was never really about physical strength alone. It was about preparation before the crisis hit, awareness during the crisis, and cooperation with the people around you. The humans who thrived weren't necessarily the strongest individuals. They were the most prepared, most observant, and most connected to their group. And honestly, that lesson hasn't expired. Modern emergencies look different storms, power outages, unexpected setbacks, but the core skills are identical. Preparation before things go wrong, staying calm and adaptive during the struggle, leaning on the people around you instead of trying to face everything completely alone. So, next time it rains for a few days and you're mildly annoyed you can't go outside, remember this. You're sitting in a dry, heated space with stored food a few steps away and light at the flip of a switch. That entire experience, the one you barely think twice about, is something ancient humans spent thousands of years engineering their way toward through trial, failure, and hard-won knowledge. You're not just living comfortably, you're living inside the solution to a problem that once had the power to end lives. And maybe that's the real takeaway here. The next storm that rolls through isn't just weather, it's a quiet reminder of how far we've come and how much of what we take for granted was once someone else's impossible challenge. So, would you have survived a week of nonstop rain 20,000 years ago? Or would you have been the one standing there, soaked, staring at a pile of wet sticks, wondering where it all went wrong? Let me know what you think because the answer might surprise you.